Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Kaylee. I use this channel to talk all about what intentional living looks like for me, whether that be through my budget, through the way that I spend my free time, how I cook, how I eat, how I clean, all of those things. So if you would like to learn some additional ways that you could add some intentionality into your life, please keep watching. Today we're going to specifically be reflecting on the month of April. Can't believe I'm already saying that. And budget for the month of May. April went by in a flash. It went by so quickly. And looking back on it now, it feels that way. When I was in it, it didn't necessarily feel that way. Mostly because there were some really heavy emotions felt in the month of April. So it didn't feel like it dragged on. March definitely felt that way. April felt quick, but it felt heavy. It didn't feel that way financially, really. There were some things that I have decided to do differently, but the decision to do that was really quick and felt very aligned, felt very easy to make the decision versus some other times where it's felt either anxiety inducing or it's felt hard because it feels like we're getting away from our goals. And you could potentially say that about the changes that we've made, and that's not how I feel. Therefore, that's not how it feels because it's our budget and our money. Can I have a kiss? Thank you. He's just gonna be here, I think. I think we're just gonna have to do this. Okay, so one thing that I want to address, I mention it briefly, I think, in the second part of this video that I have already filmed, and that is we did change the way that we're doing the student loan thing simply because we are not making enough money to warrant the stress that it brings to try and make sure that we're allocating a certain amount per month. So right now, the goal is to get to a place where we are in the positives for how much our income for the year so far to our expenses for the year so far. I'm tracking that every month on my spreadsheet. We don't talk about it a lot here because I like to leave that for the quarterly updates. So if you go and watch the quarterly update that was posted 2 weeks ago, I think, so you can go and check out that video to see where we were at for the quarter. But because I track it month to month, it just doesn't make sense to continue putting ourselves in further negative numbers when we don't have to, because it's okay. One thing that I have to remember is we don't have a lot of debt. Our debt is sitting right over $15,000. Our car should be paid off in June, which will then take that down to $14,600 of our total debt. All of that debt is my husband's undergrad loans. None of those loans are accruing interest right now because he's in school, so they're in deferment. And none of those loans have more than like a 4.2 or 4.3 interest rate. So even when they do start accruing interest, in the grand scheme of things, we're not looking at a 27% interest rate like on a credit card. So it is possible for it to not all get paid off by the end of this year. And that be okay. I'm taking a big breath there because it feels not okay because that was the plan. That was the goal, was to be debt free by the end of the year. But if it doesn't happen, that's okay. The other thing that I need to remember, I was going to say that we all need to remember, you can remember it with me, is that when my husband finishes school and passes his BCBA certification exam, he gets a significant pay bump at work. Significant. So it's very possible that we'll be able to be super aggressive in the second half of the year and actually be debt free by the end of the year. But I'm trying not to sweat it because in the grand scheme of things, it's good debt, it's low interest rate debt, and none of that debt is accruing interest at the moment and won't until like November or December of this year. So we have time. So the way that I changed how we're doing it now, Before I said we were going to still budget for it and then just move that money that would be paid on the student loans into a savings account instead of actually paying it, so that we still had access to that money in case of any emergencies that popped up. Now, we have significant savings and a pretty large emergency fund already, but to me, that's not real money. Our savings account is not to be touched unless there are dire circumstances, or for the instance of the past year and a half or so, to pay off my husband's master's degree so we didn't accrue any more debt. Now, that being said, it makes the most sense to me to have access to that money, but then when I was looking at our annual income to expenses, it doesn't make sense to go more into the negative right now when we could actually be working our way to a positive amount. And it makes sense when I look at the spreadsheet. And I mean, I can show you the spreadsheet, but I still don't know that it'll make sense to you unless you're in my brain or unless you think about finances in the same way that I think about finances. I think that's the real difference. So instead of allocating the money, I took that money off of the spreadsheet. So whereas before I had allocated $911.43 for loan payment, $600 of that being towards student loans, and $311.43 for our car payment, I've just allocated $311.43. I took away that $600 because it didn't make sense financially to do that right now. Now that money is still sitting there. It's still sitting in the savings account that I put it there for. However, when I break down all the percentages and all of the things, hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense to you why I did that. And I don't need it to make sense to you because it makes sense to me. The other thing that I did was I did boost our eating out budget. I think I had it at $350 and I bumped it to $450 because that made way more sense. I don't know who I thought I was trying to be by doing that at $350. That's kind of the general update on any changes that we made, anything like that. How did we feel? There were a lot of heavy emotions this past month, but on the whole, we felt good around our finances. We overspent our budget and we overspent in some categories, but I'm not hard pressed about it, to be honest. Because also the reason for a lot of those purchases that put us over budget were purchases made for the celebration of my husband's 30th birthday. And we weren't going to not spend that money just because we didn't allocate enough at the beginning of the month or that we didn't spend well at the beginning of the month. He was not going to get punished for that. We are not hard pressed about anything, which is so different than a couple of other months where I have been very hard pressed about being over budget. I'm not this month. All right, let's take a look at the pie chart. So I'm starting with rent and utilities just because it's such a large amount. Rent and utilities was 33.8% of our overall spending for the month, which is not surprising based on how other things are taking up percentages. But yeah, it's been closer to the 20-ish% the last 2 months, but that just means that there's a little bit more of an equal spread on everything else. So rent and utilities, 33.8%, subscriptions, 0.4%, gas, 4.1%, which is a higher percentage, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the breakdown of each category's budget and actual spending. Travel was 3.6%, loans were 5.6%, business expenses were 1%, miscellaneous was 17.2%, savings 10.6%, which is still really freaking good. Really good. Groceries 7.5%, eating out 9.4%, and insurance payments 6.8%. I'm so proud of that savings amount, and that's the reason I have decided that until we are in the positives for a year for our annual income to expenses and like annual to date income to expenses, because we're doing a really freaking good job still saving money, even when we're making significantly less than we are used to making. I just want that to be heard and known and seen because I'm really proud of us. We would have been in the negative, probably would have added like $50 in the negative for annual income expenses if we had paid the $600 on the student loans, or if we had really kept that allocated in the budget. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that for the reason of it will take us one more month, maybe two, just because there's some fishy things coming up next month, to get into the positives and for us to then reevaluate how we want to tackle the student loans. Stick along for the journey. Keep watching if you want to find out how that saga ends. I do. I want to know. I am excited to know. Now let's look category by category breakdown. I do the percentages and I do the category by category actual budget to actual spending breakdown because I've said it before and I will continue saying it. It is so good to look at your finances and at a lot of other aspects of life from different angles because it makes you feel differently about the money. It makes you feel differently about your clothes in your closet because that happened too when I was redoing my closet for the spring and summer. There are just so many avenues in which it is beneficial for you to take a multiple angle approach to a certain topic when it comes to something that is a major component of your life or something that you are hoping to maintain very well and maintain very intentionally. And that's what I'm trying to do with my finances. Groceries, we budgeted $400. We overspent in this category. We ended up spending $421.15. We would have not overspent, but again, it was a purchase specifically related to celebrating my husband well for his birthday, so we freaking did it. And then for eating out, originally we'd budgeted $350. I bumped it to $450. We still overspent. And I didn't move it any more than $450 because really that's the maximum I would hope to have spent. But we spent more than that. We spent $522.12. And I'm not hard pressed about it. It is just fine. Rent and utilities, we spent $18.90. That's for rent, utilities, internet, and our cell phone bill. Subscriptions, we spent $19.98. That is for Spotify and Disney. I think we have like one more month of Disney Plus, maybe two. And then we're done with that subscription. We get a special deal, $2.99 for 4 months, and we'll be canceling it after that. Gas. Gas was surprising to me this month. We budgeted $180. We overspent. We spent $228.65 because the prices of gas keep rising and then falling and then rising again. If you also live in America, I'm sure different states and different areas are experiencing different fluctuations, as in your starting rate was probably a different amount than our starting rate was, and so therefore the fluctuation is slightly different. But we have gone up to almost $3.50 and then back down to under $3 and everywhere in between. So depending on when we've gotten gas, it's either been like $34 or $47 for the same amount of gas. So I'm a little worried about that, mostly for June when we have some travel coming up that we will be driving to Florida for. But it is what it is. Travel, budgeted $200, spent $200. That was specifically for giving my parents the first payment for our beach vacation in June. They paid for the Airbnb and we're just paying them in increments. Loans, initially we budgeted $911.43, but I bumped that down to $311.43. That's exactly what we spent. That went directly towards our car payment. For insurance, I think I budgeted differently in the budgeting video, but not because I meant to, just because I didn't update the number. But we budgeted, I knew how much it was going to be. I just think I didn't update the budget on my spreadsheet. So we budgeted around $381. We spent around $381. For my business, this is another category where we overspent. I budgeted $28.98 and ended up spending $56.51 because I spent like $27 at a bookstore, because a couple of Enneagram books that I have had my eye on for a while. I have enough people in my life who also enjoy the Enneagram and have some Enneagram specific literature, and I've borrowed it from them in the past, but it was on sale. I grabbed that and one other Enneagram specific book. Miscellaneous and personal, we budgeted $800, which felt like so much money, and we overspent this category. We spent $958.91. So really quickly, overall, we overspent our budget by $328.36. However, even with that, we still saved nearly $600 for the month, which helps our ratio for annual to date income to expense ratio a lot. I'm very grateful for that. Now we have to dive into the miscellaneous category and break it down between green, yellow, and red light purchases. As a reminder, green light purchases are simply ones that we actually budgeted for in the month. I knew that they were going to happen and I budgeted specifically for them. Yellow light purchases are ones that I didn't necessarily budget for, but are purchases that we're okay having made and kind of planned. I'll explain all of that in a minute. Planned for that money to have been spent, just didn't budget for it, or didn't know that it would need to be budgeted for that month. And finally, red light purchases are purchases that were not budgeted for and were also technically completely unnecessary and we shouldn't have spent that money, or they were things kind of on our definitely not list. First, let's go over our green light purchases. The first one was $87.71 for my husband's coffee. We ended up getting a refillable canister, which is like an airlocked canister that our local coffee store, Alma, sells, and 2.5 pounds of coffee, because it's cheaper over time if you just take that canister to be refilled rather than purchasing a bag every month or every 2 months. So it was a bigger purchase. It'll never be that expensive again because now we have the canister. So it'll actually be cheaper than buying a 2-pound bag of coffee in the future, because we'll be getting 2.5 pounds instead of 2 pounds. Then we had a purchase at Target, which were for some refills on some different medications, a face SPF for me. We needed toilet paper, tissues. Then we had $130.38 at Roswell Auto Center. That was for my car and my husband's car to both get oil changes. Then a $25.41 purchase at Whole Foods, which was to get my digestive enzymes. $22.25 at Advanced Auto because I needed a wiper blade. Mine started peeling off. $11.87 at Hollywood Feed to get Brecker some allergy medication because the allergies were really messing with him. $34.56 at Reformation Brewery. That was for New Girl Trivia, which was an event that we had planned for and knew was coming up on our calendar. And then $280 for my hair. As you can see, it's shorter and it's lighter for the warmer months coming up. Those were the green light purchases. It was a lot that we were budgeting for, and then I gave a buffer because I thought, surely there's no way that we'll spend more than $800. I was wrong. Yellow light purchases. We did a lot of book shopping this month, and it was great. I don't regret it. I wouldn't have changed it. I'm very happy with all of the books that we purchased. I did a haul a week ago if you want to go and watch that. However, I was really on the fence about putting these in the red light category versus putting them in the yellow light category, because technically they're unnecessary. But in my 2025 reading goals video, I did say that we had like $100 budget for books. We might go over that. We haven't gone over it yet, but we might go over it for the year. I don't know. So when I was talking to my husband about it and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many red light purchases this month. He was like, what are you talking about? What has it been? And I was telling him all of the bookstores, and he said, I don't think that that's red. I think that's yellow, because we knew that we would spend around $100 on books. We just don't know when that's going to happen. And so he convinced me. We changed them to yellow light purchases. So the first yellow light purchase was at 2nd and Charles, which was for books, $9.29. The next one was $5.72, also at a bookstore called The Sweet Read, which is a used bookstore here locally in Woodstock. $4.76 at Half Price Books. $9.15 at Goodwill, which was also for books. $9.50 for parking in downtown Marietta for a dinner that we went to. $79.48 at Lucky's Beverage World. Again, things to celebrate my husband's birthday. $34.97 at Groove Life, which is like a premium silicone ring brand. My husband has been walking around unmarried for a while because he lost a lot of weight after our wedding. His wedding ring doesn't fit. So we got him some silicone rings, but now all of those are like stretched out too much. So that was that. And then $18.09 at Thrift Books, which one of those books is a gift and one of them is for my husband. If you want to know what books we bought and how many we got for less than $35, please go watch the video from last week. Quickly, the red light purchases, $5 at Giggle Monsters, which is a donut company. They're fantastic donuts. It was delicious and totally worth the red light purchase. $14.86 for pickles. There's a local brand called Hooch Pickles. They're great. I don't know if they're worth $15, but I bought them. $8.17 at Quick Trip. That was again for like drinks when we were going to someone's house for dinner. $7 at Goodwill. That was for like a beach cover up, so it doesn't get counted with the book Goodwill purchases. $34.21 at a place called the Sock Shop for some clothes for myself and my husband. They were totally unnecessary, but we got them, so it's red light. $13.78 at a local thrift store that supports the Cherokee Humane Society. Don't regret that purchase at all. I have a beautiful new vase that was hand blown glass and it looks like tortoiseshell. It's so pretty. And a 85-ish made in Japan like coffee carafe. So happy with those purchases, but they were red light purchases, so they exist here. One quick update, and then I'm going to send you over to budget for the month of May. In my travel budget, I specify that we're budgeting $1,200 in May, but I've had to bump that to $2,500 because my brother is getting married in Minnesota in November, and they finally set the date and paid for the venue. And so I went ahead and got our hotel and our flights for that trip in November, and that was not in the plan when I made the second half of this video. So I'm going to send you over there and we'll budget for May together. Hello there. Let's go ahead and start budgeting for a new month. We're looking at budgeting for May, and I am nervous about this month, if I'm honest. I'm nervous about the next 2 months, if I'm very honest, just from a budgeting perspective and an income perspective. The reason for that being, we're traveling in May and we're traveling in June. And one, the flexibility of my schedule and the amount of time off that my husband gets through his work is a huge, huge positive to the way that we want to live our life because it gives time for travel to happen. Currently, however, if I'm not working, I'm not making money. And if my husband isn't working, he's not making money. Now, he does have PTO, paid time off, and he will get paid for all of the time that we are gone. However, because of his current role, he often has overtime hours, and we're used to that being factored into his paycheck, and it won't be. Also, the caretaking that he and I do for my sister and another person won't happen when we're traveling, and while that's completely and totally fine, it just shifts the way that our income is probably going to look for the next 2 months. And because we're traveling, our expenses are going to look different than they have in the past. With all of that said, I have already looked at our calendar and I have already looked at some things that we need/want to purchase. So we're going to go over those things first. So let's first look at the calendar. Looking at the month of May, we have 31 days in the month. We'll be traveling for 9 of the days. Jonathan will be gone at dinner time for 8 days out of the month. He will be completely gone for about 6 days. He's doing some dog sitting for a friend of ours. We have 2 nights where our dinner will be taken care of because of either an event that we're going to or caretaking where both of our meals will be covered. Memorial Day is in the month of May, which just means that Jonathan will have 1 full day off. And again, like in April, when he has a day off, it often means that we might venture outside of the house, spend a little bit more money than we typically would on a day where he's working, or a weekend where we just like lounging and not doing much. So that means that we have 13 nights where we are both home, and that helps me because then I know how many nights I have to plan to cook a meal for 2, and I can start already planning those meals a month ahead in my head so that when we get to the month of May, I am not scrounging trying to figure out meals or making it just simpler if we just went out to eat. You know what I'm saying? So 13 nights at home, I'm thinking probably 8 of them I will cook for. 5 of them I want to budget for us being out of the house. I'm going to do the budget a little bit higher for those 5 meals so that it gives us some buffer if we end up eating out more frequently or going to a place that costs more money. So I'm budgeting around $60 per 5 meals, which honestly just means that we can probably get 8 meals if the majority of them are cheaper, and then 1 or 2 nicer, like sit-down restaurant meals. So that puts our eating out budget at $300, which is honestly higher than I want it to be. But the reason that I'm doing that intentionally is because I have noticed over the past 2 years of tracking our budget, I started tracking our budget in May of 2023 in this way. We tend to eat out a lot more in the months that are warmer because I don't want to have to cook because it's already so hot and sticky, and it's just adding one more thing to do. It's turning on the oven or turning on the stove, which then creates heat in the house. And in Georgia in the summer, the less heat you create, the better. So we often find ourselves wanting to eat out more, me wanting to cook less. So I also want to look into some really good either cold meals or things that I can prep ahead of time and just have just hunker down for a couple of hours in a really hot kitchen and then know that I have, 3 or 4 meals out of that time that I spent in the kitchen. With that being said, if I'm looking over the last couple of months of groceries, I think I'm going to budget $350. It feels slightly low, but I also have to consider we're going to be traveling for 9 days and Jonathan won't be home for 6 days. $350 should be enough to get us through the month. $300 for eating out. Rent and utilities is the same as always. I already know what we owe, and so we've budgeted like $1,830 for rent, utilities, cell phone, and internet. I am so excited to get to September. I know it's quite a few months away. However, we got new phones 2 years ago. It was the iPhone 15. Yeah, had to have been 2 years ago. We upgraded our phones and we did the payment plan through T-Mobile. And so in September, our phones will be paid off because we did the payment plan through T-Mobile. And I am so excited for our phone bill to go down because it'll be under $100 for our phones and our internet once those monthly payments stop having to happen. So I'm very excited for that. We're a couple months away, but it's closer than it's been. Then we have subscriptions, which are budgeted for $19.98. We have $16.99 for Spotify, $2.99 for Disney Plus. We have 1 more month of Disney Plus after this, and then that will be going away probably. For gas, I'm budgeting $180. I know we went over last month, and I hate that, but gas prices have been fluctuating so much. But again, with us traveling for 9 days out of the month, I think 180 should be okay this time around. Travel, I'm going to come back to, and loans, I'm going to come back to. So, insurance, we're looking at $368.94. That is our life insurance, our car insurance, and an umbrella policy. My business expenses are a little higher this month because I have my annual domain payment and my annual website subscription payment. So business expenses are budgeted at $235.98. This is my most expensive month out of the year when it comes to my business because of the website charges. And then for miscellaneous and personal, I have a couple of things that I know we need to buy and a couple of things that I want to buy. So what we need to buy is I need to buy purple shampoo because I got my hair done in April and put some blonde in, and my hair tends to lean really warm. And so I just want to get some purple shampoo to help tone the blonde. I need to get a pack, so stupid, of Stanley straws because my Stanley, which is right here, I think what happens is when I open it, I kind of brace this piece, this top like piece on the straw to get a really good like twist in. I don't know. And so it pushes the straw, and I think over time, which I've had this cup for nearly 4 years and I've never needed to replace the straw. So it has lasted a while, but there's a giant hole in my straw. I probably have water up to like here right now and I can't even drink it because of the hole in the straw. And again, I know it's dumb to have to buy Stanley brand straws, but one, all of the other metal and plastic straws that I have aren't long enough or they're too long. And then two, I really like the width of these straws, and I know that you can get dupes on Amazon, but I'm an anti-Amazon girly, okay? So instead, right now my money's going to Target because they sell the Stanley brand straws and I can literally pick them up on May 1st. I know. Just switching one giant corporation for another. I know. I'm trying to get away from it as much as I possibly can. We'll see. Honestly, actually, hold on. Let's just take a look and see if a couple of these things that I am needing on Facebook Marketplace. Yeah, so people are selling their Stanley cups that like come with the straw. So yeah, I checked Facebook Marketplace for that. Let's see, USB mini to USB-C. This is probably a shot in the dark. Okay, sometimes I have really good luck with Facebook Marketplace, like for a bunch of stuff for my sourdough journey. I was able to use Facebook Marketplace, but it does not seem that we have that as an option right now. So instead, we're just going to calculate what all of it would be paying for it at full price from a store. So the things that I know we need, like toothpaste, a mini USB to a USB-C for actually this microphone right here. It's got a short in the cable and detached from my computer or the mic mid filming. Mid recording, and it's very annoying. So I want to get a smaller cord and a cord that plugs directly into my computer, because right now I'm from the mic into an adapter into my computer, and I would rather just have a micro USB to a USB-C and be able to plug it in directly to the computer and get a new, better cord. So I need that. We need toothpaste, Stanley straws, like I said, purple shampoo, and then I was hoping to potentially get a pair of Dr. Scholl's white sneakers. I also am open to potentially getting other white sneakers. I'm trying to decide what I want to do because I'm really wanting some new all white sneakers, and I was really hoping to potentially get them before our trip in May or while on our trip in May, because it's the most versatile. I can wear it with probably any outfit that I'm taking and to any event or place that I would be going to while there, other than like one thing that I can think of. So there's a pair of Dr. Scholl's. I know, kind of lame, but they're so freaking comfortable. They have a platform sole and they're called Time Off sneakers, and I've heard really good things. I have some Dr. Scholl's slide-on shoes. sandals, and so I can only imagine that these are definitely going to be comfortable as well. I just need to determine if I want to purchase some before I go or potentially order them there or buy a different kind of pair there. Also, the Gazelle platforms from Adidas, I do really like, but I just don't know if I want to be spending over $100 on a pair of sneakers right now. So, we'll see. But I'm putting in a buffer because all of those things are roughly $170 that I would need to budget for, but I'm going to go ahead and budget $250 and hope that that is enough of a buffer to stay within that budget for the month. Now we're going to jump back over to travel really quickly. We're budgeting $1,200. $200 of that is for our June trip, actually. My parents paid for the Airbnb that we're staying in, and so we're paying them back over a couple of months. So $200 is going to them. And then the rest of the $1,000 budget is for our time in the Netherlands and on the travel days to and from the Netherlands. So that's probably higher than we need, to be honest with you. I think when I went by myself last year, I spent less than $600. And then, actually, no, I spent around $800, but I got 2 tattoos while I was there. And that was in that $800 price. And then when Jonathan and I were there 2 years ago, I was there for over a month. Jonathan was there for 2 weeks. We also went to Italy. I also went to the UK, and we spent like $1,600. So I think $1,000 is plenty. We probably won't spend that much, but definitely wanted to put a buffer in there to set ourselves up for success. The last thing is loans, and I do have a bit of a change that's happening, and I know that I just changed things up last month going into a new quarter to see if a new method on paying off the student loan amount that we owe would work. However, because of what I talked about at the beginning of this and our income being slightly different and varied going into May and June, and even in April, it was lower than I anticipated it being. Instead of budgeting a certain amount, we are going to just see what we have left over at the end of the next 2 months and then pay what we can on the student loans. We're still planning to pay off the car this quarter, but I want to make sure that while I want to be really aggressive with how we're paying off these last few loans this year, I also want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in the red again this year. So I want to see the amount of income to expenses month to month, like accumulated for the year. I want to see that get to a positive number before I feel comfortable getting super aggressive paying off the rest of the student loans. With that being said, the only amount that I'm budgeting for right now is $311.43, which is our car loan payment that we pay every month. And I'm not going to budget anything for the student loans. However, I'm sure we will pay an amount. I'll just let you know what that is in the May update budgeting for June video. So that puts us at about $5,050 for our budgeted amount for the month. And I'm just realizing I didn't do any intentions for the month at the beginning of doing this, so I'm going to do them now. Obviously, like I said, almost every single month this is going to be an intention. I intend to stay within that budget. I intend for us to stay within that budget. I also just really hope that we make the most of our trip in May. We're going there for my best friend's daughter's 16th birthday. We're surprising her. She doesn't know we're coming. So I'm really excited about that, and I want to make sure that we make the most of our time there and that we're not stressed about what we're spending or how we're spending it. So while I would love to stay within the budget, I also want to make sure that we're not skimping on making memories with some of our favorite people just because we're trying to stay within a budget. And I have had to be really gentle with myself about that in the process of filming this, but it feels more weighted because it has been recorded, and I feel more responsibility to stick to the amounts that we're budgeting and to stick to the plan that we have. But I also recognize that I'm human and that life throws curveballs literally all the time, if not every day. And we've got to just roll with the punches and make sure that we're doing what we can to the best of our ability. So that's what I hope for this month. All right, until next time.